Thank you for that, Roberto. For those who came late, my name is Rebecca Webb. I'm the Art Power Film Curator. I'd like to invite the unstoppable triumvirate of our guest speakers this evening. I'll start with the director, Roberto Hernandez. Please come to the stage. Next, I would like to invite Alberto Diaz-Calles to the stage, please. He is the director and professor at IRPS. And then next, we have Isaac Ardenstein. There he is. Welcome, Isaac. Isaac is a visiting professor, and he also is a filmmaker himself. So tonight we're going to just open up the floor to Q&A. Please keep your questions brief. Just from anywhere from production to politics. Isaac, of course, is a filmmaker. He's very well versed in all aspects, as everyone is. So just you'll answer as you see fit. Okay? Thank you. So enjoy. And who would like to ask the first question? Here, maybe I should hand you the. Excuse me.
Hi, Robert.
Oh. Yeah. Oh,
Hello.
Oh, that's why.
Bueno. Yeah. So, just thank you for being here. And, maybe it's a great movie, but maybe you can explain a little bit more, Roberto, that the fact is that policemen and ministerios públicos and policías judiciales, they have an informal quota. They have to deliver good accounts to their superiors. So whenever you get, one of every 10 crimes is only get into the judicial system in Mexico. But once you get into that judicial system, you definitely find yourself guilty. So maybe how can we change in Mexico this conception of just not everyone that you caught might be found guilty, and just to explain that everyone around.
Can't hear the question.
Okay, so the question is about the quotas Mexico has. Mexico has police officers in Mexico are often as a management tool. They are required to have a quota of arrests each week. Detectives have to submit to courts, accuse about 15 persons every 2 weeks. That used to be the case. I don't know if it's never been officially admitted, but my wife, Laida, did some observation in prosecutors' offices in Mexico City, and she found this out, and it's been confirmed by a few detectives. And it's just a problem of perverse incentives. How do you make sure that your employees are working efficiently? It's a question that has not been solved properly by Mexico. But evidently it's a perverse incentive, and it's something that should change. I don't know if we should take like a number of questions at the same time, like three or four questions.
I thought maybe they could. Whoever wants to ask a question, come up on stage, so everyone can hear the question, and we don't have this happen again.
Is it possible to lower the lights just a little bit?
I
feel like I'm being interrogated. I feel like Toño. Thank you. You're guilty.
red hair.
Actually, I have a really loud voice. So thank you. Felicidades. Muchas felicidades. I have a question too, and it's really what can you hear me?
Wow. Wow, that's the first time I've ever been told that my voice wasn't loud enough. So my question is, what do we say to people who say, one of the last images on your movie was that there's a new reform, and that the presumption of innocence is now part of the justice system. And what I've been asked is, gosh, of all times now, with the drug violence and the narcotraficantes and the cartels, how does Mexico go forward with a system that might make it more difficult to convict the accused, but hopefully do it in with more integrity? And so the question that's been asked to me is, why now? How is this going to help us overcome violence, and how can Mexico go forward?
So, why not now? That would be the answer for me, because it's really urgent. We don't even know who we're imprisoning with a system like this. It's completely unreliable. It's according to the statistics that we showed, 92% of criminal accusations are based exclusively on eyewitness evidence, and it's very unreliable, a very unreliable form of evidence. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be using it, but it should be collected in more reliable ways, and that is not in conflict at all with effective law enforcement. In fact, Mexico wasted, I don't know how much public money in this prosecution, in this trial. Toño was tried. He went to appeal twice, and he had 2 trials, and that was a lot of public money spent on persecuting a person who was not the guilty person. So I think there's no real conflict between having adequate identification procedures and adequate trials with public safety. But it's true that politically, public safety concerns do take the backseat when you have so much violence. I actually think there's a lot to be gained in having a better structured police, and a police that has to respond methodologically well to how they identify somebody, because then they will have, they can be accountable in trial, but the system doesn't make them accountable right now.
And I add, just if I can add a couple of things. One of the things you might not realize from watching this movie is that most Mexicans believe that our courtrooms are like US courtrooms. I think before this movie, that's what Mexicans think a courtroom looks like. And a Mexican courtroom looks like, actually these are nice courtrooms compared to compared to state level courtrooms. It used to be typewriters, not even computers, and I'm sure there's still some that are like that. So that's one thing I want to highlight. The second thing just is a very tricky thing, but this is about the culture of the legal profession and the culture of judges. So some things that we might think are obvious and commonsensical. I think this last part of the movie where they kind of show that in fact 2 of the magistrates believed there was enough in the file to actually convict him, even once they were on the appeals process. It tells you a lot about sort of how this legal profession, I think has thought of their role and has thought about how they should value evidence. And kind of the third thing I want to put on this is that it was not until August of last year, you see the Dactial case?
Yes.
That it was the first time that the Mexican Supreme Court actually made a ruling that specified what due process in the Mexican system means. And I'm not a lawyer, I don't understand all the details of that, but it is remarkable to think that it's only now that we're starting to even say what due process means.
If you look into, Mexico has a database of Supreme Court decisions and federal court decisions, and if you look in that database the word tax, you'll find it 6,000 times. If you look the word torture, and it'll show up 7 times in the entire history of Mexico's. So that gives you an idea.
I wanted to add something following what Alberto said, that what most Mexicans believe a courtroom is in Mexico, and it's Perry Mason. We believe that it is like an American courtroom, and I think that's one of the many great values of this film. It's an unprecedented window, a look into this system. Last night I took a peek at the documentary. I knew I was going to see it here, so I could talk about it after seeing it, but I was completely riveted. This was a brand new world to me. I mean, sometimes in the press you see photos, el careo, you see a guy behind bars, and you kind of have an idea how court cases proceed in Mexico. And what I wanted to say is that it was masterfully captured by Roberto. I mean, I think your group is called Abogados con Cámaras. I would call you filmmakers who are attorneys. This is really a superb film, and I'm not saying it because we have the director here and we're supposed to say nice things, but it hits on all cylinders. I mean, it's hard to really take apart a film like this because it works in the videography, it works in the editing. It's a masterfully structured story. I mean, it really feels like a fiction film where somebody was able to invent all the twists and the turns, but no, this is what they captured. But not only what they captured, this is what they structured in the editing room. So the music, the background sound, the camera is exactly where you want it to be. And then when you need a respite, when you need some rest, when you need to process the information, Roberto and his editor know exactly where to give us that rest. So again, I was just so impressed by the filmmaking, and of course, it's hard to separate it from the content. I mean, the form follows the content, and it produces a very, very powerful film that is every documentarian's dream to really affect social change. And I think, I mean, if you read the Mexican press, if you look at the box office numbers, it really is having an incredible impact in Mexico.
Thank you.
Do I need to come up to this?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, that's a wonderful film. I have a question more about the filmmaking. If you could tell us a little bit about the story of gaining access to the prison. I'm sure there's a story there. I work with indigenous filmmakers in Oaxaca, and I've actually told them about the film. I'm sure they knew about it already, but I wonder what your distribution plan in rural or regional parts of Mexico might be, as it would have a lot of effect there as well.
Well, access. It was really difficult to get access to film, and I guess that's why this film hadn't been made, even though this is happening in such a huge scale. The toughest part was getting the right case and getting Toño. Without him and without his permission, there would be nothing. But if you approach a person who's accused of homicide, and he's going to have a trial, and you ask him, hey, can I film your trial? You know, they're going to go, the attorneys are probably going to refuse, nobody wants to anger the judge. So it's very important, it was very important that he had already been convicted, and he already had lost an appeal. And then he knew that if he tried the same thing again, he would just lose. So that was the very most important thing, to have his trust, and that he knew that we were going to try a stunt that nobody had tried before, and that it was okay to play it like that because he had nothing to lose anymore. So with his permission to film the retrial, we went and we asked the judge for the permission to film, and in a challenging way he responded, well, I have nothing to hide. So I don't know how he feels about that now. But in Mexico, courts are very hierarchical. They don't really do things without the permission of somebody else. So what the judge said, just go and get the permission from the president of the tribunal. And we went to the president of the tribunal, and I made basically a moral argument. I said, look, I think this person is innocent, and I think if we don't show this, this is always going to go on. You have a lot of innocent persons in prison, and this is the ideal case to show this. And he took like 2 weeks to respond, and he came back saying that he agreed. And then that's how we were able to continue filming. We had to convince also the prison authorities, because the film, well, it's shot at the very boundary of the prison and the courtroom. So where Toño is standing, it's already the prison authority that needs to grant us permission to be there. So we went and convinced them, and that wasn't too hard, because the prison authorities hate the judges. They're like, we have all this poor innocent inmates, and nobody likes that. So we were able to find alliances. And it was tough because we had to, during the time we were filming, administrations in the prison changed 3 times, and the administration in the court changed twice, and we had to go and get our access every time that happened. So that's how difficult it was. and it helped that we were lawyers and we were able to understand who we needed to go to get each of the accesses that we needed.
So the next person can come up here. Kate will be
I got-
passing over the.
Well, is that one working?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, sure. Oh, perfect. Excellent. Thank you. I thought this was for. You sure you don't want this one?
I think Roberto was doing it better than That was
Lawyers with microphones.
It's also to Roberto, sorry. I've already been to the website and I've already seen the movie before tonight. I was really into it and I really wanted to see what I could do to help. And I had a few questions. One was if you know how much this movie has helped so far, if maybe you've gotten more cases have come out since then, more people are more verbal about it because they understand that now they have kind of more proof to show how corrupt the system can be. And also, I went to go to donate, and I was just curious, I assumed the donations go to lawyers to help fight for the innocent people that are in jail, but I was curious what exactly donations go to.
Okay, so the film has helped uncover a number of cases, but these are unconfirmed cases. What we did is we put our contact information on the website, and given that many people were contacting us to ask for help, and I created a little survey with Google Forms. And so I'm collecting information on whether they were identified by a stranger and what procedures were followed during those identifications, because we already know a lot about, from the scientific community, we already know a lot about how procedures should have happened. And from what they tell us, we know if they were alone in a lineup, well, no, there was no lineup in effect, and that's really bad. Or we know whether they were interrogated and how long. That sort of information I'm collecting, and we've had 700 persons fill out that form, and about 1,500 persons contacting us by email, just telling us a little bit of their story. But of course, I haven't been able to confirm any of the cases. The most urgent ones I do send to the media, to people who want to do some investigation on them, and I hope we're able to do something more structured and more organized. The money that is coming in for the film, I forgot to mention at the beginning, this is the first not-for-profit theatrical exhibition of a film in Mexico as well. So we, the whole box office profits, the net profits, are going to go to Renace, which is an NGO who has done work on wrongful conviction for 15 years in Monterrey. And in Nuevo León. So it's a state that, well, in the north and the south with Texas, but it's not enough. Renace has not enough capacity to deal with this problem nationally. And we always thought the film was going to lose money. So right now, to be honest with you, I don't know what we're going to do with the money. It's not a lot, to be honest, but it's significant, and we have to make a plan on how to spend it best.
Can I add just something, because I think Roberto is too modest to tell us, but one of the things I should say about Roberto and Laida, who's his partner in this whole process, is Laida, for example, has been the co-PI of the first, and I think the only, survey of prison inmates in Mexico that has been done. And both of them are real social scientists who have been really understanding sort of the justice system as scientists, as social scientists, as going along with this whole process of, doing this project at the same time. So they know what they're talking about. Whenever you see these little statistics in the film, I mean, these are really hard data. They're not just the thing a journalist heard somebody say out there.
And I insist they're filmmakers. But that's my job tonight. No, I agree with you, and it's really impressive. But I also wanted to shed a little bit more light on the filmmaking process, because it's really, again, a very unique film. Not only your access to the courts and the prison, we learn now. What were your conversations with your director of photography when you went in the morning to shoot? I mean, how would you plan it? Did you have 2 cameras, 1 camera? Just give us a little bit of a feeling like what one day of production was in the courtroom. And also, give us an idea about how many hours you shot in order to make this hour-and-a-half film.
Okay. So we shot 350 hours. And it's a very inefficient shooting. I think only Eisenstein has shot more. And frankly, there were not enough conversations with the photographers. They were very disoriented in the courtroom. And so most of the footage was ruined. And it doesn't come across like that in the edit, but it's the truth. Because there's a dot matrix printer in the desk where the judge is sitting, and that's right in the middle where your sound source is, the sound was completely messed, and the photographers could not hear what was going on. I was sitting 3 meters away, and I could not understand what the witness was saying. When he says that he couldn't recognize Toño, I didn't even, he just said, no. And so it was really difficult for the photographers to follow the action, and sometimes they were just like trying to film whatever else because they thought it was boring or difficult. So we had to fix the film in the edit, and it took 1.5 years to post-produce the film so that it has the fluency that you see it has right now. Most of the footage, because the judge is dictating all the time, is ruined also, so all the fluency that you could have is lost. And because the attorney is not trained really to have an organized interrogation or cross-examination, he's jumping from different topics to different topics all the time. So the edit helps us to put those themes together so that it makes sense. But if you just watch the raw footage on a run, you don't know what's going on. So it really took a lot of effort to make sense and to give meaning to each of the things that you see. So cinematography and the language of cinematography became very important to give it the pauses that it needed so that you could understand that when the witness says he can't describe Toño, that's very meaningful legally. So we had to create pauses in there. When he says he can't see who fired, we had to create a pause right there so that you could think what that means. But in reality, those pauses don't exist. So, and artistically, if I can speak of that, I think that the process was constantly of trying to lift this thing from the mud, because it's ugly, it's horrible. The trial you see is, it's not uplifting spiritually, it's very disorganized, it's not a dignified way to try someone. And the worst part is that as we're filming it, we're noticing that he is going to lose and he's going to get reconvicted. And it's very painful to be knowing that while you're filming this. So I'm pleased that it came out well. The scene I love most is when Toño is cleaning the windows. Right after the witness says he didn't see who fired. But it's not actually what happened. Actually what happens is that Victor, the eyewitness, laughs at him, and the whole court becomes very chaotic, and I don't think the audience needs that. So I'm trying to give the audience something uplifting and to get the audience to see Toño as somebody who, in spite of it all, is going to dance and try to jump, and maybe he's going to fly out of that prison.
There's a saying that an editor friend of mine has, and it reminded me a little bit of what you just described with the window, that it didn't happen at that moment. And this editor says, you lie, cheat, and steal to tell the truth.
In a way, I think it's, it's very true that the camera doesn't capture the emotion. You have to construct it. And, but it feels that way when he gets convicted. It feels that way when the witness says who fired. All those things are there. It's a process of making all these emotions visible to everyone.
We have a question here.
Oh.
Here.
Why don't we make it easier this week?
The work.
I wanted to ask you, don't you think a big part of the problem is that the attorneys, many times that they're very inept and there's no consequences to them, They never get disbarred, they never, there are no consequences. And many times they just take your money and they don't do anything. They get illegal, ¿cómo se dice? Testigos? Witnesses.
False witnesses.
False witnesses and do everything and they're still working.
So I completely agree that there's a lot of incompetent attorneys who haven't been trained and public officials who don't know what they're doing. The judge doesn't know what he's doing clearly. Detectives don't know what they're doing also. But this is the first time that you are getting to see this. And to the extent that you can see this, it's politically unsustainable. You can't, this is not an acceptable trial for anyone. If all the trials were as visible as this trial, things would change very quickly. The judge would be present, the attorneys would know that they're being evaluated publicly for what they're doing. Detectives know that they can't answer "I don't remember," and prosecutors would know that they can't offer their conclusions in a floppy disk. So I think having a public trial where the hearing and the evidence that is presented is meaningful and understandable by everybody is going to be very important in Mexico to change what is going on right now. Right now, you got to see an oral trial that the edit and the shooting and the post-production created for you. But the trials are much worse. You get to see defendants being tried from different cases simultaneously in the courtroom. It's far more chaotic than what you saw right now. They dressed up a little bit for Tonya, but normally they're wearing jeans and they're selling newspapers in the courtroom or reading or having their shoes polished. I even saw a courtroom where the hearing room had a microwave oven for them to eat. It's just, so all those things become impossible.
Can I add one little thing to this? It's an interesting question about the dignity of the judge, you know, and the phrase that strikes me in the U.S. in the way you refer to a judge, you talk about the judge sitting at the bench or sitting on the bench. How do you say? I don't know the phrase. Yeah, and that's the way you refer to the judge. So the judge is sitting in the trial. I mean, that's the dignity of a judge in the U.S. The dignity of a judge in Mexican courts is that he has the nicest office, and that office is isolated from all this noise and all this mess and this courtroom. And the courtroom, I guess this one had only one trial at a time, but many will have 3 at a time, for example, 3 trials going on at the same time.
Oh, they were having trials on the other side of the courtroom at the same time.
Okay. So there's something about the dignity of the judge which is very different. But then the other side of it, we do have to acknowledge is also the public defendants. I mean, because public defendants, I think the average is they usually have like 500 cases a year. You might know these figures better than I do. They're just completely unprepared, but they are public defendants, and they're, you know, sometimes they do their job and they try to take care of this.
The system prosecutes everything. So from stealing a beer or potatoes, chips, to a murder in the same way, and so you get to see the same procedure applied to everyone.
Oh, you know, I'm sorry. Just a very quick question. You know, the subject of corruption. We saw the corruption of how a trial is held in this situation in Mexico. What about the more brazen type of corruption where judges are just paid off? Is that as prevalent, or is that more anecdotal? What's your thinking about that?
So we've done surveys to inmates, and we've applied an inmate survey 3 times. Well, CIDE has done this, and Laida did this survey. And in the survey we asked, if you had given money to X, do you think they would have let you go? And so the first one is the police, the second option is the detective, then you go down to a court and the secretary, and then the judge. So police, 50% of the inmates say that if you give money to the police, they'll let you go. With detective police, about 22% say if you give money to the detective police, they'll let you go. And to judges, 2%. So, but that's an inmate survey. So it means that those who paid the bribe are not captured by the survey.
Roberto, probably the public is not aware that the filmmakers are being sued in Mexico. Probably they don't know that. And I'd be really terrified to be in your shoes, knowing, seeing what you showed us. Is there a way to help you? Could we like being witnesses and help you somehow? Because I really wouldn't like to see you in a movie like that.
So we presume guilty is now being tried, and now we're presumed guilty. Yes, we're being sued. The witness sued, and it's very complicated and bizarre to explain. But there's an organization that depends from the Home Office. How would you call the Secretaría de Gobernación?
Ministry of Interior.
Ministry of Interior, that is in charge of rating films. And Mexico has a procedure known as the amparo, where you can complain against any act of an authority that hurts your rights. So Victor Reyes, the eyewitness, submitted an amparo against the Ministry of the Interior for rating the film. And he is claiming that the film violated his privacy. But the Ministry of the Interior has no power to look into any of that. They can only rate films. If not, they would have to call Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and every time that they have to rate a film to make sure that the actresses or the participants in a film gave their permission. But that's the claim that was made, and a judge, Blanca Lobo, ordered the film pulled from theaters as a cautionary measure based on this lawsuit. And then an upper court corrected her and threw out her order, but then she came back and again ordered something weird. She ordered us to camouflage the witness, that's the word she used, from the 300 prints that were already playing in theaters. It's impossible to do. And again, it's ridiculous as a cautionary measure because the film is printed. So you would have to go and pull the film from theaters to do this camouflage, and then if Victor loses the trial, then we already spent crazy amounts of money. But it's, that's what's going on right now, and the International Documentary Association has, it's a US-based organization that advocates for documentaries, and they've analyzed this case, and they've analyzed the film, and they've seen that they don't think there's a viable privacy complaint here, because nothing in the film shows Victor's private data, I think. But so they wrote a letter in support of the film, and it's open, and it's in the IDA website, and you can look it up and sign it, and that would help a lot.
Thank you very much. Could you explain a little bit about the levels of government? Is the court system federal, state, local, and are the police, PGR, federal police, state police, Policía Vial? Who is it that was accusing him?
Okay. Well, I mean, the simple answer is it is a federal system. It's like the U.S. And the fuero común would be local, sort of state level courts that do all the criminal cases. And whenever you see all these things about drug trafficking and whatever, those are federal cases. Those are in the federal courtrooms. The federal system is better funded and supposedly more competent in many ways.
Just more expensive.
Well, I don't know. And the state level one, there's a couple, including the one here in Baja California, which are moving very quickly to oral trials and trying to do, a sort of massive overhauls of their systems. But that's not in every state. That's just in a few states. In this case, I guess you should.
Well, this is a local Mexico City case, and as you could see in the film, it's a written system. So what that means is that essentially the prosecutor can submit an accusation in writing, and it's very difficult to controvert or to contest that accusation in any meaningful way in the courtroom. The entire dynamics of how you cross-examine and interrogate are really bizarre. For example, the defense attorney cannot ask any closed questions to the witness, to the hostile witness, and so it's very difficult to expose how he might be lying. So, but that's probably for a trial advocacy, of course.
Please. in the police are PGR? Are they federal? Are they state? Who are
They're
the
both
detectives?
sorts of police, but in this case, you have Mexico's local detective police investigating this case, and they have a really absurd system where the cases change hands every 24 hours. So there's no leading attorney, leading detective responsible for the investigation. That's why, in spite that this was a really easy homicide to solve, because they had the names, well, the nicknames and the addresses, and the bicycle at the crime scene, and there's other things that they had that I can't show in the film because it would have been eternal. But it was a really easy homicide to solve. And instead of checking the bicycle, for example, there was a bicycle abandoned at the crime scene. Instead of checking it for fingerprints, they sent it to have it valued. How much is it? I have a friend who complained that he was kidnapped, and he had evidence because he was filming with a cell phone, and he put that in a DVD. And then instead of analyzing that as evidence, what the prosecutor did was have it valued, and it's it's worth 5 pesos. So that's what happens. It's like a robotic organization. And that's the sort of challenges we have.
I just wanted to comment something very interesting that is part of this whole process and the role of government in general. I was noticing in the credits that you got support from a Mexican government institution, INCINE, Instituto Mexicano de Cinematografía, also Fondo para la, what was the other fondo? It's an interesting contradiction, but maybe not. I was very happy to see their support.
Yeah, well, it's a mosaic of, so the filmmaking organizations are making progress. We also couldn't have made the film without CONACYT, which is funding us through our PhDs. I want to underscore, I'm a student at UC Berkeley, like perhaps many persons in the audience are students as well. And we have funds from CONACYT to do our PhDs, and that allowed us to have this 5-year-long follow-up. But the funds from INCINE and from the federal government did not come after until we had finished filming. And only when they saw that we had a viable film, then they supported us to post-produce. So Mexico needs more documentaries, and we need to change the way they're funded so that we have more.
Just another brief statement. What you said about this documentary, this Mexican documentary breaking box office records in Mexico, it's very significant because you're part of a community. Nowadays, when you go to our landmark theaters, the so-called art theaters, most American independent films are documentaries. The fiction is coming from Europe. It's either fiction from Europe, documentaries from American independence, or of course, big Hollywood blockbusters. So your colleague filmmakers here in the States are also documentarians, and it's a space that's been very hard fought, but it's great that it's making it into movie theaters. I know that it's circulating in the internet. So you're having like a multi-platform release, which is really wonderful, and you're really part of a larger story, which is exciting. I mean, we have our own documentarian heroes here, Michael Moore, of course. So it's exciting that this forum is getting such credibility and such wonderful audiences as we can see here.
Okay, we have time for the queue here, and then I get the last question because I'm the curator.
Yes.
Mucho gusto, mi nombre es Araceli Saucedo Villanueva, soy de Mexicali, soy una estudiante aquí y trabajo para el centro. Y mi propósito de pararme aquí no es para hacerte una pregunta, nada de eso, sino es para realmente agradecerte que en todos mis años de vida yo creo que este es el principio de que he visto un cambio en México, en nuestro México querido, ¿no? Y como estudiantes como tú estamos afuera de nuestro país queriendo hacer un cambio de afuera hacia adentro. Entonces vengo a agradecerte y además aparte también vengo a exhortarte de que siento que esto nomás es un principio, estamos tocando base o la superficie de algo más de lo que hay, ¿no? Hay mucha corrupción y me he estado documentando en todo esto, lo que es presunto culpable y todo lo que inculca. Y he estado viendo la oposición de varias personas que dicen que si te fijas en el reclusorio hay mucha gente, ¿no? Allí. Y muchos de nosotros realmente si los viéramos en la calle yo creo que correríamos porque muchos de ellos realmente sí se ven como delincuentes. Entonces yo pienso que realmente el problema en sí yo pienso que es no tanto eso, sino que hay mucha gente joven en nuestro México sin oportunidades de trabajo, de educación o cosas de eso. ¿Y qué es lo que pasa cuando tienes un pueblo que es joven, como es México, sin oportunidades y sin cosas de esas? Entonces se dan casos como este. Entonces yo pienso que es un paso, ¿no? Lo que estamos viendo de la corrupción. Más aparte también sale eso de las oportunidades y que muchos de nosotros nos tenemos que ir a buscar o regresar. Entonces, pues yo estoy parada aquí para exhortarte y para decirte que, pues gracias, ¿no? Gracias por este primer paso de hacer un México más digno y con más oportunidades.
Gracias.
Congratulations, also from Mexicali. I just wanted to ask you, are the trials ever done by a jury of their peers? And if they're not, how come they're being like judged by one person or a group of people that are all inside the system and are defending their own, peers, I guess?
Okay. That's very interesting that you talk about juries, because in Mexico City's Code of Criminal Procedure, the juries are there. It's part of how you should be tried, but it's just not put in practice. And nowhere in Mexico it's put in practice. Even in states that have reformed their procedures, like in Chihuahua, for example, you have a panel of 3 judges, but you don't have juries. That said, however, I don't think that juries are what's going to prevent cases like Toño. If you, in a trial in the US, if an eyewitness accuses you, there's still a high chance that a jury would convict you. And what the experience with DNA exoneration shows in America is that about 75% of the persons who have been exonerated with DNA were accused with eyewitness evidence. So juries don't protect you from that sort of evidence. It's very persuasive, and at the same time it's very unreliable evidence. And the same thing happens with confession evidence. The DNA database of exoneration shows that 25% of the exonerees confessed falsely to the crime of which they were accused. And they were all tried by juries in oral public trials. So it's no guarantee against wrongful convictions. I think that it's most important to change the way that evidence is collected in the first place, and that would prevent a huge number of cases.
One more thing, and regardless of the fact that they're innocent or not, I think that one thing that should have been highlighted more was the fact that they're treated like animals. They're not even treated like humans. And like I said, regardless of the fact that they're innocent or not, that should not be happening, especially not 20 people in one cell, or sleeping on the ground with just one cobija right there.
Can I just take the opportunity to advertise something? The 26th and 27th of May, US Mex is having actually a workshop exactly about criminal justice and the history of criminal justice. One of our fellows who is somewhere out here, I hope, Elisa Speckman, has been organizing this, and she has studied the era when Mexico actually had trial by jury, and she has studied that criminal justice moment, and we're going to have an event which half of it is going to be in Tijuana and the other half is going to be on this side. So I invite you to, we actually tried to make that event be the same day that Roberto was coming.
On that note, Rebecca, I just wanted to ask something. I'm teaching a class on Latin American cinema. My students are here tonight. It wonderfully coincided with the screening. And we've read 2 chapters in Peter Smith's Modern Latin America, Colonial Foundations and The Revolution Tamed in Mexico. And I'm wondering, what tradition are we looking at here? I mean, where does this kind of trial come from? Is it a historical legacy that we have, a foundation, or a perversion of something? I'm very confused about that the more I learn about, the...
So there's influences from the Inquisition. It's the truth. Torture. It's the truth, but also from the French system. We have an averiguación previa. The French have what they call l'enquête préliminaire, which is exactly the same written thing. So there's documentary films that have looked at the French system. You will see many similarities in very different, but at the core of what's happening is the same sort of dynamic where the police will accuse you in writing, and then a judge will just convict you. And there's two films, both from Raymond Depardon that have one has looked at the prosecutor, and the other one has looked at the trial, and it's very scandalous to watch. And then the whole use of paper, that comes from Philip II, that you have to document everything in writing, and it became a trap. But it's very interesting to look at the history of this and then undo this history.
One last question here, and then my final question.
Thanks. I'll try to make it a question. Actually, I teach as an adjunct at Thomas Jefferson School of Law. I teach comparative law through film. And so that's why I came here, because it's so difficult to find any films from Mexico. And the only film I have is Esmeralda by Night. I don't know if you know that, but it's similar. I mean, call it a trial, but it's really just a series of depositions. I mean, but I have to say, the thing that I found, I would like to actually talk to you afterward and make this film required reading in my class, and how I can get the film. But what I think is astounding about the film is that it's not only is it a documentary, and maybe you've read how there's a theory that the documentaries lie and fictions tell the truth, and this seems to be a combination of the two. I mean, not only is it a documentary, but it's a narrative that you put together. And so here's my question, I guess. Looking at it as that, sort of more objectively, I don't know if objectively, neutrally, what struck me was that he was free in the end because of deliberation. Now, I know you say that's not, having a jury, having a panel of judges and all won't make a difference, but at least from just looking at the film as a narrative, that to me is what struck me, is that when finally people were discussing it, that panel of judges, then you had some justice.
Can I say just something about this words, about the words? The last time we showed the movie here at UCSD, I had forgotten that it was actually a private screening because you were not allowed to show it. So we didn't really make a very open invitation. But John Haviland, who is a linguist here, said that one of the things he found most striking about the movie from a perspective of a linguist is what happens with words in a Mexican trial. And his comment was, words are not the words of a witness or the words of the defendant or the words, they're actually the words that are then dictated by the judge into this secretary, and this secretary then writes those words. So the words are kind of completely, transformed in that process. And he thought that in some ways, that there was no hearing in this process just because of that, from the perspective of a linguist. So I wanted to share that with you, I think, prompted by this.
And I agree, because the judge is defining reality for legal purposes every time he's dictating into that file. And whenever you see a fluent conversation going on about whether a question is allowed or those live discussions, they're not getting dictated and they're not making it into the official legally truthful record. So I feel that the film is more truthful than that legal record that they have. So in a way, I very much appreciate this comment that was made just very recently about fiction and documentary.
On that note of fiction and documentary, I thought that Toño, your subject, was very well cast. I started thinking, seeing it the second time, he's a rapper, right? I mean, he raps, and when he was confronting the witnesses, the intensity really, it almost gets into a rhythm, because the judge has to repeat it, and it's going back and forth.
The edit, we play with that, and at the end you have to play with what you have. So it helps us dramatically that they have to dictate when you know that you're coming to a pivotal moment, and you leave every phrase they're dictating, so that it builds the stress. The dot matrix printers helped a lot, because then you're struggling to listen and you get angry just by that. So there's a lot of elements that help us with what we have tell this. If we remove the rap, for example...
By the way, I wasn't talking about the rap music that he does, but cuando está en el careo, when he's, confronting the witness, he has this incredible force, this articulate, delivery of his truth. And I was very impressed that in a way, it was almost like a musical skill that he had, you know,
I
an
think
ability to communicate as an artist.
He is a rap artist, and it comes through in the film. And he was able to cross-examine that way because we trained him over the phone for 20 hours with a book, so that he was able to ask the question that his attorney couldn't ask. It's when you're watching a film, you're not thinking perhaps, but